Tonight, new calls for peace in turbulent times. On this Easter Sunday, Pope Francis appealing for a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine and Israel and Hamas. But in Gaza today, a deadly drone attack outside a hospital diminishes hope for the latest round of peace talks. And Prime Minister Netanyahu says nothing will stop an Israeli attack on Rafah, the southern city that has been a refuge for millions of displaced Palestinians.
I'm Holly Williams in Tel Aviv, where protesters have filled the streets, demonstrating against Israel's government and its handling of the war.
Also tonight, massive effort. Giant cranes now helping to clear the mangled debris from the Baltimore Bridge as a community mourns. Plus, California fast food workers are getting a raise to $20 an hour, what it could mean for business owners facing higher costs and the rest of the country. There's a new threat of severe weather ahead this week. Damaging winds, rain, and even tornadoes are possible. We'll have the forecast. And later, a mariachi makeover, putting a woman's touch on a centuries-old male-dominated tradition.
You have a what? Oh, female, this is crazy.
This is the CBS Weekend News from New York with Jerika Duncan.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us on this Easter Sunday. We began at the Vatican, where Pope Francis today overcame health concerns, giving his traditional Easter message to tens of thousands of Catholics gathered in St. Peter's Square. The 87-year-old pontiff pleaded for peace, renewing appeals for a ceasefire in Gaza, calling on greater aid deliveries to the besieged territory and the release of hostages held by Hamas. Today, the terror group skipped ceasefire negotiations, which resumed in Egypt. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed to proceed with the ground operation in Rafah hours after announcing he will undergo hernia surgery today. CBS's Holly Williams starts us off tonight with reports on another deadly day in Gaza.
In Jerusalem's Church of the Holy Sepulchre this morning, where many Christians believe Jesus was buried, they celebrated his resurrection. Easter's a time of hope for Christians, even with the Holy Land in the grip of war. But in Gaza, people are praying simply to stay alive. An Israeli strike hit the grounds of the Al-Aqsa hospital today, killing 4, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. Israel's military said it targeted a militant command centre operating in the hospital's courtyard, where many people are sheltering in tents. But some of those wounded in the explosion were apparently journalists. We were staying in the tent as a group of journalists peacefully, with no terrorists among us, says this man. We were preparing our cameras and all of a sudden the tent was hit. With the Israel-Hamas war now in its 6th month, Al-Aqsa is one of the few hospitals in the Gaza Strip that's still functioning. Tanya Haj Hassan is a paediatric intensive care doctor who recently visited the hospital with an international team of medics.
People are tired. Our team has been doing this for 5 days. We're exhausted. I can't imagine what the Gazan team, who's been here for 162 days, doing this 24/7, 162 days without resources, is dealing with.
In Tel Aviv last night and tonight in Jerusalem, some of the biggest anti-government protests Israel has seen since this war began. Thousands were on the streets, angry at the way Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has handled the conflict.
This government is doing horrendous things in Gaza, not in our name, and we want the government to take responsibility and resign today, right now.
The head of the World Food Programme, Cindy McCain, warned today on Face the Nation that famine is imminent in northern Gaza, saying, quote, "We need unfettered access, and right now we don't have it." But Jerika, Israel has said that claims it is blocking aid are wholly unfounded.
Holly Williams, thank you, reporting from Tel Aviv tonight. Today, officials in Israel said they killed a significant Hezbollah leader during an airstrike in Lebanon. The Israeli Air Force said it struck a car about 6 miles from the Lebanon-Israel border. Officials say the commander of Hezbollah's anti-tank missile unit was inside the vehicle. Now to the latest from Baltimore. Today, workers began cutting the steel beams of the collapsed bridge. It's one of the first steps in reopening a shipping lane, which is an economic lifeline for the people of Baltimore. CBS's Nicole Skenga is there tonight. She's been covering this story from the very beginning. Nicole, good evening to you.
Good evening, Jerika. Crews have begun to cut the steel wreckage surrounding the container ship. Now, the 21-member crew and 2 pilots remain on board. That is standard to ensure that the vessel doesn't pose a future risk, but officials confirm they are safe.
These massive cranes and their operators standing by, ready to lift the debris trapping the cargo ship Dolly.
Behind me, about 1.5 miles away from the crash site, you can see the Chesapeake 1000. That is the colossal crane responsible for lifting up to 1,000 tons of twisted steel off of the container ship Dolly.
Crews making the first cuts into the mangled beams.
This is going to be a very complex process, so it takes a lot to make sure that it can be dismantled safely, to make sure that the vessel stays where it is supposed to be and doesn't swing out into the channel.
Seconds before the Tuesday collapse, Maryland Transportation Department police officers calling on scanner traffic.
Hold on traffic on the Key Bridge. There's a ship approaching that just lost their steering.
Rushing to shut down traffic on both sides of the bridge.
Stop traffic on that site right now.
Police Union President Jim Krasinski.
3 officers from the Maryland Transportation Authority Police saved dozens of lives in an instant with their quick thinking.
6 families are mourning the death of their loved ones. Construction workers repairing the bridge when it crashed into the river.
El Señor es contigo.
And on Easter Sunday, parishioners gathered at this church to remember them.
Nuestros 6 hermanos.
Our 6 brothers that died from the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse, the pastor said. We must help them face the empty tomb.
Right now, there are a handful of fundraisers to help support the families of victims. The Baltimore Civic Center has already raised over $350,000, roughly 4,100 donations. Jerika?
Yeah, the family's going to need that support. Nicole Skenga, thank you. In his Easter message, President Biden renewed his commitment to work for peace as wars take a toll on innocent lives around the world. The president started his day releasing a statement chastising his political opponent's recent social media posts. Skylar Henry is at the White House with those details. Skylar, good evening to you.
Jerika, good evening to you. The Biden campaign says that the former president, quote, regularly incites political violence. This response comes as the former president shared an image of President Biden bound and restrained in the back of a pickup truck. It's the latest in a series of posts from Trump targeting his opponents both politically and in the courtroom, as Trump also blasted the New York judge presiding over his hush money trial and his daughter. That trial is set to begin in a couple of weeks. On the legal front, Trump has until Thursday to put down a $175 million bond or cash with the court to comply with his New York civil fraud judgment. On the campaign trail, President Biden is expected to spend the week here in Washington. The former president will be on the road making stops in Michigan and Wisconsin, Jerika, ahead of another round of primaries on Tuesday. He'll then spend the latter half of the week fundraising down in Florida. Trump is looking to raise more than $33 million. Some of that money will go to his campaign. Other parts of that fundraising will go to the PAC that pays a majority of his legal bills.
All right, Skylar Henry on top of it all. Thank you. Now to the latest round of violent weather spreading across this country. Today in California, more than 20 million people were under flood watches. Heavy rain washed out roads in Montecito, about 90 minutes northwest of Los Angeles. Let's bring in meteorologist Molly McCullum from our partners at the Weather Channel. Molly, good evening to you.
Good evening, Jerika. It's been an active holiday weekend on the West Coast, but there's some good news in the forecast. After record rainfall in San Diego and Los Angeles on Saturday, we'll finally see a break in the wet pattern by Monday. And considering how many cities in Southern California have already surpassed their yearly rainfall just 3 months into the year, it's going to take some time for the water to recede, and flooding is going to be top of mind. But you bring that moisture up and over the higher elevations, and we'll see more snow in the Sierra, and it's really going to pile up in places like Yellowstone National Park. Now, as we bring this system into the plains, we'll see a substantial threat for severe weather on Monday from southern Texas to the Ohio Valley Damaging wind, hail, and tornadoes are all in play, even in the overnight hours into Tuesday morning. Jerika,
good to
back
know
to
so
you.
People can prepare. Thanks, Molly. AT&T is investigating a major dark web leak that's impacting more than 70 million past and current customers. AT&T says the breach appears to be from 2019 or earlier. Addresses, social security numbers, and other personal information were leaked online. AT&T officials say the customers' account passcodes have been reset. It's urging customers to monitor account activity and credit reports. Well, tomorrow there's another chance for a giant Powerball payday. Monday night's jackpot drawing is now $975 million and creeping towards the big $1 billion mark. No one matched all 6 numbers from last night's Powerball drawing. There hasn't been a big Powerball winner since New Year's Day. Someone won over $1 billion in the Mega Millions last week. It's an Easter tradition filled with fun and finery on New York's famed Fifth Avenue. The Easter Bonnet Festival and Parade draws hundreds every year who simply mill around outside of St. Patrick's Cathedral. The bold and the beautiful met to show off their Easter finest. Today, Britain's King Charles made his first major public appearance since announcing his cancer diagnosis back in February. The King attended Easter services at St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle along with Queen Camilla and other members of the royal family. Prince William and Princess Kate were not there as Kate undergoes preventative chemotherapy treatments for an unspecified cancer diagnosis. Straight ahead on the CBS Weekend News, the fast food wage hike served with a side order of new fears for some in California. Starting Monday, the nation's highest state minimum wage for fast food workers takes effect in California. Owners and employees are sizing up the potential impact. CBS's Jeff Nguyen is in Los Angeles with more. Jeff.
Come tomorrow, more than 500,000 fast food workers will see a significant jump in pay. But Eureka, chains like McDonald's already say they plan to raise menu prices to offset their costs.
California fast food workers will get a $4 an hour pay raise. This 25% increase will take their minimum wage to $20 an hour, the highest such wage for fast food workers in the nation. The law affects chain restaurants with 60 or more locations. Organized labor lobbied hard for the bill, which Governor Gavin Newsom signed into law last fall. They argued it would help improve the quality of life for low-wage earners. But some business owners say their profit margins are already slim.
I want to pay them as much as I can, but this bill has really hit our operations hard. We're no longer hiring, we're not growing, and I'm ultimately thinking about selling or closing my business.
And chains like McDonald's, Starbucks, and Jack in the Box have warned that consumers should expect to pay more in the Golden State. Last December, 2 Southern California Pizza Hut franchise groups announced they would lay off all of their delivery drivers rather than pay the $20 wage. End result, more than 1,200 people lost their jobs.
Speaking of frustration, critics will say there are unintended consequences to such a law.
There's no way to have it be, that there are no unintended consequences. But at the same time, there are, some merits to, to doing this, particularly if we have minimum wages that are not, rising fast enough to keep up with the rate of inflation.
The new law will also create a fast food council, Eureka, that will develop employment standards, rules, and regulations for the industry.
Jeff Nguyen, thank you. Still ahead on the CBS Weekend News, what's sapping some farmers' syrup supply? It's a sticky situation. For generations, it's been a destination for travelers on the historic Route 66 through Illinois. It's the largest maple syrup farm in the state. But as CBS's Noel Brennan reports in tonight's Weekend Journal, the warm winter has impacted the sap season.
We're approaching my favorite time of year out here because all the plants are starting to come up.
Before spring sprouts, the spouts come out.
You get into a rhythm after a while.
Grace Springer pries them loose from tree after tree, signaling the end of syrup season in McLean County, Illinois.
We make maple syrup. It's pretty straightforward. So
Grace has been learning the ropes and the tubes at the historic Funks Grove Pure Maple Syrup Farm.
I don't know the trees by name, but close.
Mike Funk steers the business that started generations ago, and he hopes to pass it down.
Yeah, so Mike will eventually be my father-in-law. It's big shoes to fill, for sure.
And big challenges to face.
Definitely an obstacle.
In years past, the sap is still flowing through the tap in early March, but not this year.
Not our worst year, but pretty close.
You do the work to get ready and you don't know what you're going to get.
It's just disheartening.
It's becoming a familiar feeling.
Our seasons they seem to be getting shorter.
We know we have climate change and we just don't know down the road how that's going to affect us.
Maple trees need temperature swings for sap to flow.
Yeah, there's some sap in there.
But a warm winter can spoil a season.
Well, I think this is the warmest it's been in February.
Anticipating those warm temperatures, the Funks tapped trees early.
We tapped in January this year, which was our earliest ever, and we ended 4 or 5 days ago, which was our earliest ever.
Like sap, the Funks learn to go with the flow.
Be ready to adjust.
We're just going to have to adapt.
No customer will notice the difference.
You usually get a gallon every year.
The syrup is just as sweet, no matter how sour the season.
It's too special of a thing to not fight for moving forward, you know.
Noel Brennan, CBS News, McLean County, Illinois.
Next on the CBS Weekend News, the women giving the macho world of mariachi a makeover. On this final day of Women's History Month, we head to California. An all-women band is breaking the mold and redefining a genre known to be a bit macho. Here's CBS's Danya Bacchus to explain.
Denora Klingler is a musical changemaker.
As a child growing up in Mexico City, I saw a lot of mariachis. Of course, Mexico is full of mariachis.
The singer never saw herself in the male-dominated genre.
No female mariachis, though. I never saw any one of those.
Mariachi is the soundtrack of Mexico, started in the 19th century and growing in popularity in the U.S. Generations of mostly male band members kept the tradition alive, serenading women across the world.
Through mariachi music, you experience love and sorrow and happiness and desperation.
And some of those women, like Klingler, decided the genre finally needed a makeover. A new tradition with a feminine touch.
My friends, my clients, they were like, what? Do you have a what? All female? This is crazy. The response, the acceptance from people was magical.
Klingler's all-female group, Mariachi Bonitas, was born during the pandemic, gathering women of all ages to find hope, to get paid, to feel empowered. Still, it's an uphill battle as more and more female bands form.
Clients ask for a female vocalist. At the beginning, we say, no, no, no.
Some musicians like Raimundo Coronado are starting to bring women into their historically male bands.
I guess my arm was twisted some years ago. It's been fun. It's a new experience for us. We're not so macho as before.
We have to work extra hard to prove that we deserve the place that we have.
But it's not stopping Klingler, who hopes to start her own legacy, as the generations of men in mariachi did before her.
Even when I'm gone, Mariachi Bonitas will be there.
Danya Bacchus, CBS News, Los Angeles.
As they should be. When we come back, Beauty and Bloom will visit the breathtaking tulip fields in Oregon, attracting visitors for decades. Our partners at BET have an all-new premiere of America in Black airing this Tuesday night. It features long-form investigative reports, one-on-one interviews with newsmakers, and it highlights issues impacting Black Americans. Well, this week I look into the disproportionate number of Black women and girls who go missing every year in this country and explore some of the reasons why this happens and what is being done to change that. America in Black airs this Tuesday on BET at 10:30 p.m. Eastern. Well, we end this Easter Sunday in Woodburn, Oregon, where the tulips are bursting with color at the Wooden Tulip Farm. Every spring, the farm invites guests to the festival where they can walk among the flowers, take pictures, and enjoy hot air balloon rides. Sounds like fun. Emily Iverson's family owns the farm. She says it's been drawing big crowds for the last 40 years.
It seems like there's just a universal appeal for tulips, especially like it's the first big spring event coming out of winter. Everyone's just itching to get out of the house, and so there's something about it that people just gravitate towards.
There are more than 50 varieties, 5 million bulbs planted on the farm's 40 acres, and while it might look like there's already a lot of color in those fields, Iverson says many varieties have yet to even bloom. And it looks like I dressed for the occasion. Well, that is the CBS Weekend News for this Easter Sunday. I'm Jerika Duncan in New York. Have a great night.